Hello, friends, and welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies, a podcast that's listening to the songs of Disney movies past and present. I'm Josh Spiegel.
And I'm Scott Renshaw. Thanks for joining us on this comprehensive and encyclopedic compendium of all things Disney music. Now playing Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros.
Before we get into our discussion, thank you for listening. No matter how you're checking us out, we hope you like what you're hearing. And if you are, we'd appreciate it if you could rate and review Mousterpiece Melodies on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever app you're using to listen.
That's right. Let everyone know how much you love the show and tell your friends to do the same. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw and read my film criticism at cityweekly.net.
And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece and email me at mousterpiececinema@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, let's start talking about the songs of Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros. And to do that, we're thrilled to bring into the show a very special guest. She is a freelance film critic and senior film programmer at the Jacob Burns Film Center, Monica Castillo. Welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we are delighted to have you with us, Monica, to talk about the songs of two films, Saludos Amigos from 1942 and The Three Caballeros from 1944. And by the way, I know it's the release dates, which I'm sure all of our listeners are hyper-fixated on. Technically, each of these films, fittingly, each of these films premiered in Latin American countries before they were released in the United States. In the U.S., Saludos Amigos came out in 1943, The Three Caballeros in 1945. But since each of these films was a deliberate attempt to contribute to the Good Neighbor program that the United States was taking part in during World War II, meant to bridge any gaps between places like the U.S. and countries like Brazil, Chile, and Mexico, many, many others. The idea essentially being that Americans needed to understand a little bit more about their neighbors to the south and vice versa, technically, but more about Americans learning about Latin American countries, cultures, heritage, and also to ward off the specter of, Nazis who were trying to escape Germany because they were horrible, cowardly, evil people who were trying to escape to Latin America. Another fun fact about World War II, if not the entire world. Anyway, the point being, these movies were a deliberate piece of propaganda during World War II. They're also very music heavy. They introduced the world to characters like Jose Carioca and Panchito Pistoles. Now, unlike in previous episodes, I can't refer to the fact that because we're all different ages, maybe one of us saw this movie in theaters. None of us were alive during World War II. So the question I kind of want to kick us off with before we go kind of song by song into each of these films, Monica, Scott, I'll answer it as well. What is your recollection of kind of your first awareness of these movies? What's your introduction to the world of Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros, if you recall?
I came of age during the sort of clamshell VHS era. So my mother was very diligent about, I think, buying almost every single Disney release. So we had this, we didn't have Saludos Amigos. I saw that only later, but Three Caballeros was on regular rotation. We loved it so much. It was so inventive and colorful and had all this music. Like, I was actually pretty stunned rewatching it, reminding myself of the film, that I kind of remembered some of the dance steps that I followed along with the movies. And the song, The Three Caballeros, is definitely like stuck somewhere deep, deep, deep in my subconscious. So I went through a phase watching it on regular rotation, and then when my sister came about a few years later, I also was a part of that reintroduction with her. So we have very fond memories of the Three Caballeros, and one of our first stops when we do visit Epcot is, of course, to the Mexican Pavilion, where now the characters are usually, taking pictures and available for, just walking around in a way that I don't remember them being in like the 1990s. So it is interesting to see like the sort of resurgence. Like, I've seen more merch and things like that for the Three Caballeros in the last few years or so. So I'm glad I'm not the only one that has these sort of nostalgic feelings about the Three Caballeros.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that this may have come up back in the old show when we did Three Caballeros, but despite the being the slightly older among us, I will say slightly just to make myself feel better, um, that while I think that bits and pieces of these tended to appear over the years on like Wonderful World of Disney, you would have one of the songs do as a little interstitial number, and maybe even the entire, because especially Saludos Amigos being kind of the shorter of the two, that they might have appeared in their entirety, but I really did not remember them, and it wasn't until we did and I watched it for the old show that I actually was like, oh yeah, this is a whole thing, and it's not just these little pieces, because I mean it exists so much as a both of them in some way or another are just they can easily be broken off into chunks and have their their little pieces that can be broadcast and put in other formats, that I don't think I ever actually encountered either of them start to finish in this order until we did Three Caballeros for the old show.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I also, I mean, I, like Monica, grew up in that clamshell VHS era. I don't know if we owned Saludos Amigos or the Three Caballeros. And it's also a film where I don't offhand, I can't guarantee that I see it in full initially, or since I also grew up in that era of when the Disney Channel was a premium channel a la HBO and Showtime. Yes, kids, it's true. There used to be such a time when the Disney Channel was that hot of a commodity. And I'm sure there were clips, because these two films, by their very nature and design, are very easy to kind of pull out as clip packages in a way, since they are literally packaged films. What I do remember is watching at least the Three Caballeros in college in a film class and getting a little bit of awareness of the good neighbor policy that, that Disney was taking part in, as that being one of the primary drivers for the creation of these two movies. And, it's also worth noting here, one of the oddest little details of Saludos Amigos specifically, is that I don't know offhand, there aren't a lot of Disney feature films that are about the animators in a way. There's The Reluctant Dragon, which I know I talked about in the old show, I think, Scott, with you. And I mean, the first time that as an adult I was watching Saludos Amigos, I was like, that's weird. It's weird that it's about them and their experiences, but it makes sense, and I don't know that it forgives either of these movies some of their creative choices. But I think it is worth pointing out when you know, at least with Saludos Amigos, oh, this is Latin American culture as filtered through, let's be frank, white guys. It's like, oh, okay, well, it doesn't make it any lesser automatically, but it at least adds an interesting layer that, as I was rewatching these films in advance of our discussion, one thing I don't know that I automatically hone in on it with Saludos Amigos, but with Three Caballeros, I'm thinking, wow, that narrator's voice changed just a little bit. Not actually a lot. It's the same narrator, but I think the guy's name is Fred Shields. It's a white actor doing clearly some accent work, we'll say. And it's interesting because there are clearly a lot of choices, especially with the music in these films, that is meant to be well-intentioned and works very well. Because the other piece of it that I also want to acknowledge from my specific perspective, we're just past the 5-year anniversary of when COVID-19 hit and when it, upended the world probably permanently. Anyway, point being, after COVID started, aside from all the daily fun, there were things like, oh, I'm doing sourdough starters, or, oh, I'm getting into this piece of, like, I'm doing this hobby, or I'm getting into this piece of pop culture. And for whatever reason, I cannot explain it. One of the movies that I obviously had seen plenty beforehand that became instant comfort food for me was the Three Caballeros. I still don't understand why at that point it became such a comfortable thing for me to watch, because as I put in my notes this time, and I'm sure I mentioned in our discussion way back when on the old show, neither of these movies to me, is perfect. Saludos Amigos is literally barely a movie, and I am using the word literally correctly for those out there wondering, because according to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, a feature film has to be 40 minutes. Saludos Amigos is 42 minutes. So there. But Three Caballeros, even with the slow start, because, Monica, you were mentioning all of the vibrant colors and the catchy music, and in both films' cases, it takes a while for these movies to warm up a little bit, I would say, and actually get to that more compelling vibe. I mean, we can start now kind of going track by track.
Yeah.
We'll start with Saludos Amigos, and because it's a shorter film, there are naturally not that many songs in the movie. I should also note for our listeners, many of the songs in these two films predate these movies. The most famous song, arguably, in either of these films would be Aquarela do Brasil, which people probably have heard about a billion times. If you've seen the Terry Gilliam film Brazil, that's the English language version of the song I'm referring to. So if you haven't seen Saludos Amigos, you might be surprised that the climactic number is a very recognizable piece of music. And to that end, when we talk about covers here, oh boy, are there a lot of covers of that song. And, last time, Scott, we talked about a cover that Michael Bublé did of a Toy Story song. I have some words to reserve for Old Blue Eye, for Frank Sinatra himself, because there is a cover of Aquarela do Brasil that is quite bad of his. Anyway, let's start though with the title song, Saludos Amigos. I like this song. I think it's one of those. It's kind of the beginning of an era of songs that play over the opening credits of earlier Disney animated films that are almost easy to forget that they're there. There's a title song in Cinderella, for example, or in, there's something in Lady and the Tramp, for example. And it's almost easy to forget that those songs are part of the fabric of the movie. I think Saludos Amigos, the music keeps getting repeated, which is very nice. I think the biggest criticism I'm going to levy against this song, I wanted this song to be maybe another verse or two, but I think it also speaks to the fact that we're talking about such a short movie that the song has to get going so it can immediately get into the action. I will say the chorus is a little like white guys trying to sound like they're from a different country. There's a little bit of a forcefulness to the accent work, I think, but still, I like the song. I like the music of it more than the lyrics almost. But what do the two of you think about the opening song in this film?
Guest first.
Well, it's no Three Caballeros, but what is?
Correct.
So it is a sweet little slow start into, sort of place setting, scene setting, what we're going to get into. And it is actually so brief. I'm struggling to kind of recall the melody of it. I will say, I noticed throughout the films that they use certain rhythmic callbacks throughout the film to kind of tie it together as one of the few ways they stitch these very sort of desperate little stories into the next one. So that theme does follow throughout. It's just not the one that stands out to me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Josh, you mentioned that idea of it being, feeling like it's a verse short. And what it really reminds me of is, every holiday season when I put on the old Christmas songs, and it feels like there's a format in which some of these sort of classic Christmas songs was done, where you'd have your star vocalist do the first verse, and then you'd have an orchestral verse, where just an orchestral version of the same bit, and then you'd have the background singers do the version of the exact same verse before, and it was just a way to pad out the song when it was really just a single verse song. And this kind of reminded me of that style. There was something about the 1940s where that was just apparently the style at the time. And yeah, I mean, it's a cute little ditty, and it's got the motif does work as it continues throughout it, but it needs a little beefing up, but that's just maybe a contemporary perspective on the way songs are constructed now that they weren't in that time.
Well, and you mentioned the Christmas comparison. You mean something like a Bing Crosby and the Andrews Sisters kind of example, I assume?
Crosby and the Andrews Sisters, like doing a version of of Three Caballeros, which we may talk about later.
No.
How on earth did you know that's why I was bringing them up, Scott? And by the way, Monica, spoiler alert, you're right. Oh no is right. But anyway, now here, the other thing I'll mention about the title song for Saludos Amigos, Scott, you mentioned the orchestral piece. I will call out, again, we're all fans of the Disney theme parks here. I have mentioned before, I am a huge fan of Disney theme park music because that's my specific type of nerdiness. And I will only call out, it's, I don't know exactly where you'd find it on YouTube. There is an orchestral, a slowed down and a little bit more, a fuller version of Saludos Amigos. That's a really, really great take on this song. Again, the tempo is a little slower. It's got a little bit more like fanfare to it. It's really quite good. I don't know who arranged that version from Disney, but it's, I would say, a very strong contender for like an underrated piece of theme park music that I don't know where it would go. I guess it would go in the Mexican Pavilion.
Yeah.
I guess, but the funny thing is I've only ever heard it not in park, but only, when trolling around online. But it's definitely worth checking out. I will say that much.
I've certainly heard the Three Caballeros theme in the Mexican Pavilion, so that plays pretty regularly.
Yes, definitely. And again, it is, as you mentioned, it's really nice to see those characters present there. Obviously, sometimes they go viral for, like, there was one time earlier in the pandemic when I feel like one of the audio animatronics of either Jose Carioca or Panchito Pistoles was really not working at the end of that ride. The ride of the
we didn't even get into the ride. I was just talking about the costume characters.
We'll get there, though. We'll have to get there, though, for sure. But yeah, so aside from Saludos Amigos, there is music throughout Saludos Amigos, the film. And I will say one thing that I don't know I would have noticed as a kid, but definitely, I don't know that I would say rubs me the wrong way, but there are moments where we're seeing the animators in different parts of Latin American countries and seeing local performers and musicians. And then you hear it on the soundtrack. And, if you're over the age of, I don't know, 8 or 9, you'd think inherently, oh, they dubbed that. That's not really happening live. And I get why they maybe they didn't have enough sound equipment to capture it live, or maybe it didn't sound great.
They didn't bring the sound guy.
Right.
But it's, I don't know if it distracts either of you. It is immensely distracting to me in watching it because, again, this is well-intentioned. You are trying to create awareness about a culture people watching may not be familiar with. But the dubbed aspect of it makes it seem inherently fake to me, because all I think to myself as I watch those little clips is that really what they were playing? Is that really what the music sounded like, or did you guys add that in after the fact in post-production? So,
I mean, it's totally possible, but I will jump in and say it
Please.
Reminds me a lot of the sort of travel talks segments that you'll see on Turner Classic Movies from time to time that are travel logs, and they just kind of parachute you in different countries. And yes, it's very much of the time and a product of how that production was done, very on the cheap, just a small crew. You shoot, a day in Dublin, and then you have, there's not really, there may sometimes be sound. Sometimes it's all, it's narrated. So most of the sound is just of somebody talking. And then occasionally they'll feed in other things that are happening with like this beautiful swelling music in the background. And their high point for those kind of things were about the 1930s to the mid 1950s. So before then, you're right in the middle of, radio and the radio height of the 1930s. So you couldn't see this kind of stuff. You would have to go to the movies to see this because television hadn't yet taken off until about the 1950s. And then that's when you could see those like sort of travelogue kind of styles of shows, but that wasn't even being produced much at that time. So really the chance to kind of see the world would have been in these little segments. So I get like it feeling like out of date for us contemporary folks who can just like pop in a live stream and jump almost anywhere in the world. But for that time, it was seen as a novelty. And of course, they weren't having the conversations we're having now about like, wow, this really feels like touristy or Columbusing this culture. And it's like, no. They were Columbusing the culture. That is that moment of they're like, oh, wow, we had no idea Argentina was like this. And, we're seeing those reactions.
Their music is strange and exotic.
I wrote that note down too. I wrote that line. I was like,
Look at their shoes. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Now, so as I mentioned, though, there are not as many songs in Saludos Amigos itself. In case anyone's wondering, why aren't we doing each of these films separately? It's because there's maybe not as much automatically. Again, if you combined these two films together, it's still less than 2 hours long. So after we have that, there are the interstitials with the artists seeing different cultures, like we just talked about. There are a few different shorts that are less music driven. There's one featuring Donald Duck at Lake Titicaca in Bolivia and Peru. There is a story about an anthropomorphic airplane named Pedro, who is in Chile. Think about that, predating the Pixar adjacent film Planes by decades. A film I really wish I could forget. And then there's a sequence with Goofy as a cowboy, a gaucho, in Argentina. A sequence that has been quote unquote controversial for a while because it features Goofy smoking. I believe currently the version on Disney Plus is the unedited version, but I know it's kind of been back and forth over the years. And then it goes into
unedited.
It should. I would hope so, because again, considering how.
You can smoke again.
Well, not just that. I just think to myself, because now that I have Disney Plus with Hulu, gone very fancy. You're looking at like, hey, Bluey, Star Wars, the 9 Perfect Strangers, or whatever that. It's like
The Bear.
The Bear, famous family-friendly show, The Bear. I'm sure I'll watch that show one day. Anyway, the point being, the last sequence in Saludos Amigos, I already referenced it as well, is Aquarela do Brasil. It utilizes this song written by Ari Barroso that, again, has been, I think I saw somewhere online, which obviously means it's true, that it's one of the 20 most recorded songs of all time. Whether or not that actually is accurate, it is a song, I promise. Even if you haven't seen the film, you know the song. You have heard it before, even if you've only heard the music. So this is the sequence where I remember watching it for the podcast, the old show, and thinking, this sequence is what I want this whole movie to be. This sequence is when the animators figure it out exactly how to blend this really distinctive piece of music with really colorful, interesting animation that is not automatically reliant on a character we know. I will acknowledge Donald Duck and Jose Carioca. I think he's only called Joe Carioca in this film. But They are both in the sequence, but there's so much of this sequence that is the animators getting to play, getting to stretch creatively. There is as much about it's as if the entirety of Brazil is coming to life, let alone the characters of Donald or Joe Carioca. This is the song where this is the sequence rather, where it all fits together so well. The music is, again, great by itself. Aquarela do Brasil is a song that very famous. But this is one where we've talked about in past episodes, the fusion of animation and music really heightens the experience to the point where, as I said, I wish the rest of this movie was like that sequence. I know it can't be. That's more what the Three Caballeros is for. It takes a little bit of time for that movie to get going. But basically, as we'll talk about very soon, basically the last 45 to 50 minutes of that movie is just really, really involving, really compelling, very creative, and again, a good blend of animation music. What do the two of you think about the climactic sequence of Saludos Amigos?
Oh, I adore it. It's also kind of reminded me a little bit of, like, not exactly one-to-one comparison, but Fleischer cartoons, where you do get to see the Fleischer brothers kind of build this world. They interact with this world, and then they take a step back and the world goes chaotic. And, has a lot of fun and stuff like that. I'm thinking maybe more out of the Inkwell kind of era for them. But, I mean, it's super beautiful, and it clearly is when, like you mentioned, Josh, like when the movie is taking off, and then of course it ends. It's so brief. It's like, wait, what? I want more of this. And then, they show up again with Three Caballeros. But until then, it's almost just like a little teaser. It is kind of like the Pink Elephants on Parade, kind of surrealist, fun. I love the fact that, Donald, speaking of Goofy smoking, Donald gets to drink cachaça here and gets a little tipsy. And it's fun. It's just fun to watch. It's visually striking. It's interesting. It is something so out of the ordinary. The other shorts are fine, but then this is the one that like really takes it to another level.
Yeah. I mean, it's by far the most interesting creatively. And it kind of makes me wonder, what if they had done a Fantasia that included, not necessarily just classical music, but, contemporary pop standards of some kind, and because that's what it really feels like. It's an outtake from, and it's, obviously very much the same era, of an outtake from Fantasia. It feels like that entire sensibility. It's also funny, Monica, that you mentioned the Pink Elephants on Parade, because that's exactly the thing. I noted that down for You Belong to My Heart with the Donald segment, and that it very much goes in that direction. But yeah, it's wonderfully animated. And I think it also, as we get into some of the other ones, it pointed out to me that the songs in this that I really enjoyed were the ones that felt authentic, that weren't trying to shoehorn their anglicized lyrics into it. I mean, it had exactly the things that it seemed to be suggesting was the purpose of this. It was giving me sort of a feel for another place and culture, even though there was not an attempt to be literal in the sense of like, I'm going to draw a picture of, Sao Paulo or something like that. But it felt like it had an element of curiosity and something that wasn't just like, let's make it as accessible as possible by taking this well-known song from Latin America and putting English lyrics to it. So it had all of those elements to it that made it like, oh yeah, please more of this. And like you said, and then no more of anything.
Yes.
That's the film.
It really does end. It really does end remarkably abruptly. It's one of those where, like, you mentioned Fantasia, Scott. When they lead into the final segment of Fantasia, Deems Taylor is sake. It's the, Night on Bald Mountain to into Ave Maria. You kind of get the sense of this is the end of the movie, whereas here it's just like, oh, okay. I mean, obviously this is also a film released at a time when, this could have been the B movie on a double feature that you go to at the local, Rialto or whatever, but it's still a very quick ending. And thankfully, The Three Caballeros, the film itself, is a little bit longer. It's about a 75-minute movie. And, among other things, I would say I put down in my notes that The Three Caballeros especially is like the IMAX tagline that you see in front of, Mission Impossible or whatever of, don't just watch a movie, be part of it. And once this movie is set up of, it's Donald's birthday, Friday the 13th, naturally, and he's gotten home movies as a present. I think my favorite line in this film is still, home movies, just what I wanted. And I think no one ever thinks that. That is absolutely a lie, Donald. Don't be nuts. Point being, he gets a few different home movies of different parts of Latin American culture. There is a short narrated by Sterling Holloway well before the Winnie the Pooh days or even Cheshire Cat days, where he is telling us about a penguin named Pablo who wants to move to a warmer part of the world. And there's also a great line that I wrote of, did you ever see such a freak beak, when the narrator is describing all the different rare birds or aves raras of Latin American culture. And once we get past that, and I forget, when we talked about The Three Caballeros, Scott, did I go at length about how much the donkey short made me mad? I won't do it again here. I hope I did.
Because it's not available to find easily anymore. I was gonna go and check it out. It's like, I guess I can't. I guess I can't find it. I'll tell you this. If there's anything, I only remember Horny Donald. That we had such a long conversation about Horny Donald.
We did. Yes, we did.
We did, and I mean, we don't need to repeat it, but it is worth pointing out. We talk about, he gets a little tipsy at the end of Saludos Amigos. It is, like, I forget, who would it be? Tex Avery is who I probably would reference instead of Fleischer when I'm thinking about, not a horny wolf, but, oh boy, Donald Duck. I think the other thing I put in my notes this time was, he is that line about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in Ghostbusters. He's a sailor. We get him laid, he won't have any trouble. He is like, it is ridiculous how much, because you mentioned You Belong to My Heart, which we'll get into soon. The intense horniness that he feels towards every woman he comes across, which, by the way, carries over a little bit into the ride at Epcot. It's definitely not as clean. I don't know if it's quite as direct in the attraction, but it's still there.
Creepy. I'll say that. Yeah.
Yes. It's even more so now because at least, I don't know that I should defend this too much, but at least when this film came out, I don't know that Daisy Duck had been in a lot of shorts. I think she had premiered before that movie, but it wasn't like Minnie Mouse level familiarity and kind of, presence. So.
Oh, sure. This is Donald the Bachelor years.
Yes. I don't know. Maybe Donald and Daisy are in a polycule. I don't know. You don't know.
Oh man, I wish I didn't know about the thing we're talking about lately, because there's the story that I've read.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think I read all I will say about that. Somebody, I forget who it was not me, posted, I wish I could forget how to read after they shared that story. And I thought, yep, I'm with you. Anyway, to this. So although there is a very brief version of the title song during the opening credits, we can save our discussion for that song when the actual three Caballeros sing it. So really the first song in this movie is Bahia, which is a ballad that Jose Carioca performs once he has shown up about 20, 25 minutes into the movie. And again, when I think about it, it's so joyous to watch a movie figure out what it is and lock in. I think Saludos Amigos locks in with Aquarela do Brazil. This movie locks in with Bahia, and outside, I'm not a big, the Las Posadas sequence is very, very slight, doesn't really have any music in it. But once we get to Bahia, the slower, more ballad-esque version that transitions into a much faster-paced version where Jose continually asks, have you been to Bahia? And Donald keeps saying no, and he somehow doesn't get mad at Jose for asking him 10 times. But I really, really love Bahia. That song specifically, the animation it's really colorful. It's not quite like we're painting you a direct picture of exactly what this part of the world looks like, but it creates a sense of life and a tactile quality almost instantly. Again, it's a really solid fusion of animation and music. What did the two of you think of both the slower version of the song and then when we get to the fast-paced thing with the train tracks and all that weirdness once they're kind of in the storybook version of Bahia?
I'm trying to remember. Does that also include? Well, yeah, it also includes Yaya, who's.
I was going to save that as a separate piece of it, but
track. Okay,
but it all
we can go up to the train.
Honestly, it all kind of fits together. You're absolutely right. Os Candim de Yaya, which is really where we lean heavily into. Oh, Donald has got it bad for this lady who sells cookies. I'm doing an impression of Jose Carioca there. I apologize. So the point being, that's also a sequence where talk about challenging themselves. You have live actors in an animated setting. I mean, there's clearly a set that they're on, that there's animation behind. Certainly the technology is a little bit more rudimentary even than it was in Mary Poppins in 1964. But yeah, it's a really, really fun sequence because also Os Candim de Yaya, talking about the heightened sexuality in this film, one thing I don't know if I fully picked up on really until rewatching the film in the pandemic, leaving aside what happens with Donald, the shot where you have the two different guys kind of staring each other down and then transforming into large roosters is one of those.
Do a cockfight, yes.
Where it's well, okay then. I see what you're. Yeah, exactly. It's and by the way, that dance scene before it turns into a cockfight reminded me a little bit of the very surreal Jitterbug scene in Mulholland Drive at the very beginning, just in terms of the combination of actors who are, dancing on clearly a FX version of a background scene. It's a little different there, but there's a lot going on in that sequence, which I think is really quite impressive because the first 20 minutes doesn't give you a sense that this is coming next, which is a pleasant surprise. What do the two of you think about this whole 10 to 15 minute sequence of the film?
I mean, like you said, it's definitely when the movie comes alive. I don't know that was fully on board with the cold-blooded penguin. It's sweet, it's cute, but it literally could have existed in any other shorts package that they had before. And then the Flying Gauchito, again, kind of all right. And then here, it locks in. It does like come alive. You have Jose joining the scene, and now he has that dynamic with Donald. You get to see like very creative interpretations of Brazil and Bahia. I love the train tracks because they almost look like chalk drawings as they come alive. And like, it always struck, I remember watching it, like I was so confused, like why are the train wheels squares? Like, but it was just like creative choice, and made it like bouncy to the music. Like it picked up from this ballad to this beautiful bouncy samba that it then continues to pick up steam when we meet Yaya, who's played by Aurora Miranda, Carmen Miranda's sister. And when, there's all this attraction going on and all this tension between different characters leading up to that, sort of impressionistic cockfight between two guys who are duking it out for her attention, like that's so impressive. And it's such a creative departure from, what those travel logs and thinking of like a travel talk kind of thing would have been, which is very much like point and shoot. Here, things really like leap off the page. And I actually love that they use the visual motifs of books and like postcards. You are jumping in and out of these places, just getting the slightest view, but it is a view. So you do get a little taste here and there. And I love how colorful it is, because not only are the animated sequences colorful, the clothing, the backgrounds where the actors are dancing are also very vibrant.
I mean, I don't know that I have a ton to add to what I said about the Coelho de Bursil section of Saludos Amigos, which is this is the same. It's, allowing a wonderful animator's playground. It's using the music in its authentic form. It's finding some things that are, just fun to watch, beautiful to watch, and it just allows for all of this. It's playful. It's just always it's not a, when you talk about the idea of what this was created to be, it's, it could easily have been just sort of a lecture of sorts, and it gets so wonderfully playful after, again, I'm not a particular fan. I zipped through those two other segments to get to this bit so fast. Like, oh yeah, I remember. Okay, that thing happened and that thing happened. And this is what I wanted from, again, watching them in the order just recently, saying it's like, oh yes, that beautiful thing. It's like, aha, now I'm going to get to that again, because that's exactly what these should have been in their entirety.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's a really, like, again, we're talking probably about a good 15-minute chunk of the movie from when we start with Jose Carioca's introduction to the end of Osquindin Yaya, which, again, it's really clever. It's really unexpected. And again, it feels like a really solid expansion of that climactic piece of Saludos Amigos, which is really great. And thankfully, there is more surreality to come in this one, including after there's a little bit of, again, one of the things that I think since I last watched The Three Caballeros and Saludos Amigos on Disney Plus, they have taken down that little message of the little boilerplate at the beginning about how these films were made at a different time, which, I mean, here's the thing. Taking those messages down and leaving nothing there is not useful. I don't know that the original message was terribly helpful to begin with, because it was pretty bland and not specific to the film. But anyway, because of that, I had forgotten that there are lines like when Donald is unable to increase his size, and I mean his whole body size, back to when his and he says, "I'm a midget," and I just thought, oh boy, okay, yeah, sure, Donald. But after that, we finally get to Panchito Pistoles, and of course the title song, "The Three Caballeros," which I should note. I believe that, so The Three Caballeros is, unlike the title song to Saludos Amigos, not a fully original song. It actually based its melody on a song that was released in a film from 1941, and Walt Disney asked for a new version of the film, of the song. There are new English lyrics, but the point being, this, like a number of songs in these two films, not a fully original song, even though I'm sure many audiences don't realize that. And it is such a catchy piece of music in general. It's so much fun to listen to. What do the two of you think of The Three Caballeros, the song?
I mean, I would come up with more things to say, but it literally is just playing in the background of my skull right now. So it is so insanely catchy. I mean, it is fun and it invites, people to sing along. It is like the sort of rousing number, and that theme repeats throughout the film as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly hearing it and constantly reminded, Three Caballeros, da 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 da. Like, you don't even need to know the lyrics to just get the melody in. So yeah, as far as like a successful song goes, where like Saludos Amigos, I would struggle to recall, there's probably no forgetting Three Caballeros for me.
Well, I think I've made it clear as we've made our way through some of these other films that I love lyrical wordplay, and I am very disappointed when lyricists do not make an effort.
Yeah.
I think that there may be a previous episode in which I went a little bit overboard in making that point. But when I get something like this, which clearly shows that somebody was, I mean, let's face it, if you're thinking about it from a Anglophone perspective of, what words do you have to play with? It's like amigos. Okay, what can I rhyme with it? But at least you did it. You did the work. You figured out a way to find not just one, but two rhymes to make that. And I will never, I don't know when I first heard the song, because it probably was in the context of just watching a little bit on Wonderful World of Disney in my childhood. But Three Happy Chappies and Snappy Sarappies will never not live in my head. It's just it is great lyricism. And so I just, in addition to being a catchy tune with lots of wonderful gritos going on, there's just a lot of intelligence and thought that went into writing the words to this song. And, and again, they're all plays on, like, what is a word from the Spanish language I'm going to use here? Peso. Okay. Stay so, peso, say so. And you got, somebody's just putting in the work. And so I'm just like, good job. I have nothing but hosannas for that.
I like how you were clapping to emphasize each of those pieces. I
Yes.
do very much appreciate it. And I will note, so the person who wrote the English language lyrics, the person who you are applauding here, is Ray Gilbert, who is an Academy Award winner for a Disney song that we are never going to talk about in full on this show, probably because the song is Zippity Doodah and the film is Song of the South. But we talk about songs that have clever lyricism. Unfortunately, that kind of qualifies in a little bit. But the point being, yes, it is a great song, and Three Happy Chappies and Snappy Sarappies. It's clever. That's very much to me like Howard Ashman, Under the Sea. When the sardines begin to begin, it's music to me. That's the same kind of lyric, I would say. But anyway, so yeah, that song, and there's the clever conclusion with Panchito Pistoles holding out the really long note that obviously has been extended in post-production, and the different playfulness of how they're trying to get him to stop singing. That's a really fun song. The only original song in this film comes after The Three Caballeros, and seeing as Panchito Pistoles is from Mexico, it is fitting that said song is about Mexico and is literally called Mexico. However, I would say if there are any musical sequences that feel a little sparse or a little lacking, I would say it might be this one, kind of leading into Las Posadas, which isn't a musical sequence, but again, talking about a specific piece of the culture. And I think part of it is simply
Las Posadas a lot, but I liked it. It's very charming, and I think that was one of the sequences that Mary Blair worked on, or at least it's very much in her style.
Correct. Yeah.
So while it is kind of a downer, it's like a calm down piece before it picks back up again with all these dance sequences.
Yes.
For Mexico.
I will say this: you are I am a less charitable or generous person, I would say, because you call it a come down, which is absolutely correct. I think for me, it's the sense of, the bar has been raised so high with Bahia. Have you been to Bahia? Osquindin Yaya, the Three Caballeros, and now, it's okay. You guys had one.
As far as interstitial pieces go, they've definitely done worse. in
Yes.
these two films alone. So for me, it actually is a connective tissue that works, and
Sure.
it is this new sort of visual style that is,
Yes.
they're introducing in the middle of all this great visual work. Sure, not the most musical segment, but I thought it worked.
That's fair. And yes, before Scott, I let you weigh in here. I will say, if people are big fans of Mary Blair's work, things like It's a Small World, yes, the Las Posadas sequence especially will be right in your wheelhouse visually if you haven't seen it before. Scott, what do you think?
I mean, I probably don't have much to add even to that, which is, there's stuff that was outside of the realm of perhaps what is the technical framework of what we're talking about. It's like, oh, there's some wonderful animation stuff. Is it really about the music? Not so much. And there's just some, I really do love the animation of the Las Posadas, but that's about I like looking at it. That's about, that's kind of the extent of it. There's not really anything else there. And I do think that for me, even though it's when you get the sequences that are more heavily live action based, I'm appreciating the, like, oh yes, they are actually using authentic songs and authentic dances, or to the extent that, they wanted to do that. But I do kind of start checking my, whatever the version is of a watch that people might wear in this time of, that there's songs that it's like, all right, okay, but I would rather be watching the animators do their thing at this particular time.
So you're saying you did not enjoy the lengthy sequence of Donald, Jose, and Panchito on a sarape looking at pretty ladies on the beaches of Mexico City?
I mean, to the extent that, a straight cisgender white guy does enjoy watching those things to a certain extent, just because, the human form is nice, okay,
sure.
But there's a lot. It feels like there's a lot more that could be done other than just lean into more horny Donald.
And it really does heighten, because after they have this trip to the beaches of Mexico City, where, again, Donald is very interested in making the acquaintance of every single woman he sees, and, of course, they all laugh at him playfully, and he does not get anywhere with them. We then lead into You Belong to... Speaking of a kind of a two-part ending I mentioned with Fantasia, and I eyeballed that into Ave Maria, here we get You Belong to My Heart to Donald's Surreal Reverie, which is a really notable fusion of animation, of live action performers, of music, of singing, of dance sequences, and it is, again, very colorful. It is really remarkable. The You Belong to My Heart song itself, performed by Dora Luce. She's got a really wonderful voice. I think it's one of those sequences where, among other things, like a lot of the stuff we're talking about with Donald, I just think they would never do this ever again. And it's incredible that they got away with it, that they chose to do it, let alone got away with it, because this is...
It was of the time.
It was, well, not just, it was of the time, but I'm thinking to myself, is there any other period in Disney's history where they would say, we want to introduce people to a different culture, let's really lean heavy into how attractive we think the women in this culture are. Who can we have really represent that feeling? And just, it's weirdly charming. I mean, I've written, I forget if it was a Polygon pre-closure, but I think it was a Polygon where I wrote, again, the horny Donald thing. It's just the most fascinating thing to me. And it really kind of hits a high point, we'll say, in these sequences at the end. What do the two of you make of the 1-2 punch of the conclusion musically of this film?
Oh gosh, I mean, the whole slew from basically that Mexico number where you have different styles of Mexican dance and Mexican music. I think, we've talked about how maybe retro this all feels, but it actually, for me, was pretty remarkable because it at least acknowledged, like, there's different dances and different songs for different regions. It's not just one broad brush, like, perspective on Mexico. I really appreciated that. Getting to see different costumes, getting to see different dances. So that was lovely. And then going into You Belong to My Heart is this very beautiful dream sequence. Definitely more Pink Elephants on Parade than I for the previous one. That was my mixed up reference. But here we really go full surrealism, floating heads, people singing among the stars, all this beautiful pica pica papel, sorry, pica papel, just floating around, and like you're getting to see this beautiful lace work and movement, and then Donald just kind of floating among all of that work simultaneously in motion. It's really, really remarkable. And then you still have this live action head kind of floating around, still singing. And then it goes into the sort of kicks up again. So we have like this like variation of like slower music, faster paced music, slower music again. And then we get it for that big, firework filled finale, where it's like very energetic, kinetic, things are moving every which way. It's almost like, a huge finale, if comparing it almost to like a fireworks show at the park, the slower songs are the ones where you get to see the big fireworks do like some sort of an arc or something, or you get to appreciate little pieces, or maybe this is where the music swells. And then at the end, you just throw everything at the finale, and the screen is just, it feels like it's popping. And then that's the end. That's how you end it. Not just in Saludos Amigos. It's like the end. And I also appreciated at the end of Three Caballeros, you have the end said in 3 different languages, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. And all the different colors of the flags of the countries, the main countries that were featured in the film.
Yeah, that is a really wonderful way to think about it, because it sort of has the feel and pacing of a concert set list, in that you don't just keep going boom, 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 boom. You find the moment where you can like, and now we're going to bring it down a little bit. And, the drummer takes a break, and, there is really that feel to it where it knows how to kind of allow that moment to breathe before, and now we're going to hit the big finale. And, or even an orchestral suite where you have, a largo, and then, you might just have a different tempos just to sort of change the feel of the piece. And that's why this actually feels a little more cohesive just from start to finish, is that it has that sense of procession, so that the music works all together in going from piece to piece to piece. Again, I just as a viewer, I would like more of the animation, and it does get a little bit weird when, giant floating head Dora Luce is there, in the middle of all of this stuff. But it really, it has a unified sense. Even maybe I wish that they hadn't written the English language lyrics to it, and I actually knew a little bit more about what Solamente una vez sounded like without that. But you can complain only so much when you're getting an American production in 1944.
Yes, and again, it's really quite clever. I will say, among many things that I don't know if I mentioned on the old show, but I put down in my notes this time for, even though we're all different ages, I'm sure we all remember the breathless anger the parents had when they thought, oh no, in The Lion King, there's a scene where Simba flops down on some dirt and it spells out SEX in the dust, or the thing with the priest of the Little Mermaid, and whether or not those are real things or if they were snuck in, versus in this movie near the end, hearing a voice say, pretty girls, pretty girls, pretty girls in the loud, like in the soundtrack, like how is that possible? It's again, so many different ways in which this is such a wild, unexpected, hallucinatory sequence, and it's you can't beat it. It's really quite impressive. It's also very odd, and like it's the kind of thing that, again, I know I like Fantasia 2000 a lot. One thing that the original Fantasia does a little bit is feel like it's not really catering just to little kids. It's trying to be a little edgier. This movie has that a little bit too. Fantasia 2000, not so much. But anyway, yeah, it's a really, really remarkable conclusion to the film. Now, I do want to point out here, before we go much further, I forgot to mention that both of these films were multiple Academy Award nominees. Both of these movies did receive at least a couple nominations at their respective Oscar ceremonies. Three Caballeros got 2 Academy Award nominations. As I mentioned, the Three Caballeros itself is not a technically original song, so Three Caballeros, the film, was nominated for Best Score and Best Sound Recording. It did not win either of those categories, unfortunately. I should note that the 1940s, as the two of you know, some of our listeners may not, was really the era when the Oscars were truly off their rocker in terms of how many films could get nominated. We think now of like, well, maybe 10 for Best Picture, but 5 for pretty much everything else. Best Sound, 1945, there were, I want to make sure I get this correct, not 1, not 5, not 10, 12. 12 nominees for Best Sound. The Three Caballeros did not win. Neither did Rhapsody in Blue or a lot of other films. The winner was The Bells of St. Mary's, speaking of Bing Crosby. In 1943, Saludos Amigos was one of 12 nominees for Best Sound. It lost to a film called This Land Is Mine, which is a great title for a movie. I have not heard of it before, I don't think, but it sounds cool. It's a Jean Renoir film, actually. I don't know how, I must have heard of it before then. But anyway, now, Saludos Amigos itself, that song did get nominated in 1943. It was one of 10 nominees that year. Among the other losing songs were That Old Black Magic from Star Spangled Rhythm, Happiness is a Thing Called Joe from Cabin in the Sky. If you haven't seen Cabin in the Sky, you should. It's a very good film. The winner was a song called You'll Never Know from Hello Frisco Hello. I have never heard of that song or seen that film, but I bet it was a fine song. And the other nominations that Three Caballeros, as I said, Best Score, they both lost. Three Caballeros lost to Anchors Away. Speaking of movies that combine live action and animation for a hot minute or two. Saludos Amigos lost, under scoring of a musical picture to This Is the Army. I think we can all, now that's a musical comedy by Michael Curtiz, but, obviously a, propagandistic film in the era. And when I talked, by the way, about how wild the Academy was, in 1943, there were actually two different categories for score. There was scoring of a musical picture and music score of a dramatic or comedy picture. And I'm looking here, there were 16 nominations for music score of a dramatic or comedy picture, which I have to assume, they made a lot more movies back then, but that's still crazy to me. So I did also want to shift into our cover discussion. Monica, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to any covers of some of the songs in this film.
I did want to throw out real quick though.
Yes.
I did a quick little research. I got the sense at one point watching the Three Caballeros that there was a little Busby Berkeley inspiration here and there, especially with some of the way some of the women were used in some of the musical sequences, and how there were bodies that were made into shapes and things like that, made into flowers and whatnot. And it just so happens that The Gang's All Here premiered the year before. Now, I don't know exactly when in the production schedule the animators might have had time to watch that or be inspired by it. But there is a moment I think it's at the end of The Gang's All Here, where there's floating heads singing. So they might have even seen something like that and been inspired to do their own version of it.
That is an interesting detail. I did not know that. But, and speaking of, Miranda's sister, Carmen Miranda, is among the cast of The Gang's All Here. So that strengthens your argument, I think.
It might have been on their radar.
And it's funny because I will admit I have not seen The Gang's All Here. I'm familiar with it. I'm looking at the plot synopsis, and it says that as the opening credits fade, a man is singing what song? Brazil, which might just strengthen that argument even more. And speaking of that song, now again, Aquarela de Brazil did not originate with Saludos Amigos. So the fact that there are a bajillion covers of the song is not really a commentary on the use of the song in this film, but there are quite a lot. I listened to a handful. There is a famous version by Xavier Cugat. There is, again, if you've seen Terry Gilliam's film Brazil, you have heard a cover performed by Jeff Moldar. There are, again, lots of others. The one that I will say, there are two that I listened to that are more modern that I enjoyed, and part of it is it's hard to imagine a version of a song performed by either Leslie Odom Jr. or absolute legend and icon Rita Moreno and it not work, because each of them has sung a version of the song, and it is quite lovely to listen to. And I will note, both versions are these Spanish language versions, whereas covers by people like Frank Sinatra and Johnny Mathis, I hope you're all sitting down, those are English language versions, and boy, do they stink, I think. Now, Scott, did you listen to any covers of that specific song in advance of this discussion?
I listened to the Johnny Mathis version. I did not get through. Yeah. I listened to a lot of Johnny Mathis in my day. My mother was a very, very big Johnny Mathis fan, and so I listened to a lot when again talking about the Christmas songs of my youth. But there was not, and I don't think I found enough of the, and I believe you said Spanish. I think Portuguese is what you.
I apologize. Yes, I did. Sorry.
But no, I didn't. I'm so familiar with the, Brazil was, again, one of those kind of formative movie experiences for me back in the day.
Sure.
But maybe I don't want to have another version that clouds up my memory of that one.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the version in the film, I think, because I haven't seen Brazil in a few years, but I do like that movie very much. And it's one of those where it's like, yeah, I mean, I have that version in my head, which meant that when I first, as a grown-up, watched Saludos Amigos, I think I sheepishly and stupidly was like, there's a different version of this song? And then I realized, oh, dumbass, there's a version that long predates the version you're familiar with. I will say it's funny, going through, there's, again, plenty of performers who have performed that song. The one that I'm thrown by, because I definitely haven't heard it, I didn't find it. Apparently Arcade Fire did a version of this song, and I don't know if I want to hear Arcade Fire's version of this song, but
yeah,
the flip side,
that's okay.
The flip side is, I will say the flip side is, I couldn't even listen to the entirety of the Johnny Mathis cover. I feel like the Arcade Fire version might not bother me quite as much, but who's to say? I will also mention, talking about Three Caballeros, we alluded to it earlier. There is indeed a version of the Three Caballeros performed by Bing Crosby and the Andrews Sisters. And let me just acknowledge, when it comes to Christmas music, you can't do much better than Bing Crosby and the Andrews Sisters. They have you don't have to be, I'm a very secular person. I don't care about the religious side of it myself personally, but the Christmas music, I'm a big fan, and their Christmas music is great, which is why I can say comfortably that their version of the Three Caballeros should go right in the trash. Put it this way, there's a reason why, if you're listening to this, you almost certainly did not know until this podcast that such a cover existed. Scott, you listened to that one as well, right?
Yes, I did.
Would you disagree strongly or at all with my throw it in the trash assessment?
I would not. So, I mean, it's an interesting start because, it almost would make sense for the Andrews sisters, the three Andrews sisters, to be doing this alone. And the song begins with them as the performers. And of course, I'm looking at the information on the screen and I see that it is Bing Crosby and the Andrews sisters. And I'm thinking, why again? It doesn't make any sense.
No.
It just doesn't make any sense within the context. I mean, it almost makes, you could do them with sisters, but yes, you don't need Bing Crosby. And of course, you also probably noted that Bing Crosby did Saludos Amigos as well. And that's just as not necessary.
I'm going to be honest with you, Scott. After I heard their cover of Three Caballeros, I think I wanted to avoid any version of Bing and these songs. So I did not hear his cover of Saludos Amigos, but I can imagine it, and I don't like it.
I think just put whatever it is in your head, and that's probably at least as good.
I will also say now, I'll let you weigh in with any additional covers you might have heard. I see online that there is a cover of the Three Caballeros performed by Alvin and the Chipmunks, and all I will say is absolutely not. No, thank you.
Yes.
No.
I can't stand Alvin and the Chipmunks to begin with, but also they would, I almost get it. Like, yeah, I get why you'd have those characters sing a song like this, but also, no, please don't. Any other covers that you found, though, Scott, that were notable?
I mean, I think I went looking for a lot of the ones, because You Belong to My Heart is another one where there are so many. And they almost all fall into the same trap, which is it's just doing it as kind of a loungy. There's, Engelbert Humperdinck does one. Julie London, who is was a fairly successful, again, torch singer might be a little bit of a stretch, but and I think that there is something, we've talked about this before in some of our other episodes about where songs work in the context of watching it in the film and where they don't. And I mean, this is a song that is obviously, because the original version of the song, the Solamente una vez, is not, it's not original to this movie. It clearly exists in its own space, but to me, You Belong to My Heart belongs to this movie, and this is one where the other versions just feel weird. I guess the last thing I'll note is I was so expecting that this would have been one of the things that Los Lobos did in their Disney cover song, and none of the songs from either of these movies are in the Los Lobos Goes Disney compilation.
Interesting. Well, the only thing I'll mention, by the way, before we wrap up here, obviously we've alluded to it a couple of times. The Three Caballeros are still very much alive and well at Epcot in the Grand Fiesta Tour at the World Showcase Pavilion in Epcot. It's funny. I think I'd forgotten that when this version of an attraction that had already existed in the Mexico Pavilion, it was originally called El Rio del Tiempo. That closed in 2007. This opened in its place using the similar track. I had forgotten that when this opened in 2007, it was the first Epcot attraction to feature pre-existing Disney characters, which feels so quaint now, considering the presence of Remy's Ratatouille Adventure or Frozen Ever After and so on and so on.
And Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, Cosmic Rewind. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. I will say my Disney theme park hot take, since I went to Disney World not too long ago for the first time in a while, I prefer Cosmic Rewind over Mission Breakout because I still love the Tower of Terror and I'm angry that they took it away. But anyway, any thoughts people want to add on Grand Fiesta Tour? I like it. It's very charming. I think it's also not nearly as good as the way the music and the characters are utilized in the film. But any additional thoughts either of you would want to add on that attraction?
Yeah, I also really appreciate it, and I especially appreciate it if I end up in Epcot during the summer and this is a ride that's all enclosed and you need a little air conditioning. And the line moves pretty quickly because
it does.
A continuous boat ride. So that's my pro tip for those of you visiting Epcot this summer.
There you go.
But it is an interesting sort of retrofit because they did already have this, pre-existing ride, and then they themed it with the characters. But the characters, a portion of the story actually takes place here. It doesn't feel so out of the way. It still feels a little educational because they still have like the map of Mexico and Mexico's different regions and all these different places, make up this one big country. And then you have now the theme of the Three Caballeros going throughout, and then you end up on the other side and, tempted by margaritas and a restaurant. And also exit through the gift shop, don't forget. So it's nicer. It feels a little less intrusive from, the Frozen rebranding. And I don't know. I'm sad we lost the Norway ride, I guess.
Yes, I miss Maelstrom.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a nice little getaway, and it's a nice, I think that retrofitting of into the Grand Fiesta Tour helped reintroduce those characters to a new generation. I definitely, there was a before that rebranding happened and an after, because now those characters are visible in the gift shops throughout Epcot. They're representing the goodwill ambassadors of the Mexican Pavilion. So they are definitely a lot more prominent, from when I first remember visiting Epcot way back when.
They are also, I should note, present in the Disneyland version of It's a Small World, those characters. It's obviously a less visible presence than the Epcot ride, since that's obviously centered on them, but they are there. The one thing I'll note before Scott jumps in, I had forgotten, even after riding it again in November, that while they do have the voice actor Carlos Alazraqui,
Alazraqui.
Thank you. Sorry. As Panchito Pistoles, As Jose Carioca, they have the very not Latin American Rob Paulson doing that voice. Very talented voice actor. Love him as Yakko on Animaniacs, but, it's not exactly the most authentic take. Scott, anything you wanted to add?
I mean, not having any experience with the pre-Grand Fiesta Tour incarnation, I totally agree. It's a wonderful, slow getaway, cool, but for those of you who are like screens, it's a lot of screens.
Yes.
It's a lot of projected animation and a few characters who appear at the very end, but it's nice to get away, but I don't have any particular fondness for the attraction as something. I mean, it feels like there could have been a little more. I mean, whatever you want to say about Frozen, at least they put some audio animatronic characters into there in sufficient quantity to make it feel like that much expense. It's like, we'll throw three occasionally functioning figures and put cartoons on the walls for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Well, it is currently under refurbishment, I think, or did it reopen yet?
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Hopefully when it comes back, everything is working, or maybe even improved. You never know. Or it will be
earlier this year for refurbishment. So we'll have to see the next iteration.
Hopefully they don't do what the Frozen ride does, where they have the talk about screens. There are kind of like screen-esque animations of the faces on there. I feel like
sure.
I'm not a fan of that ride. Anyway, I think, unless there was anything else either of you wanted to add, I think we're ready to wrap up our discussion of the songs of Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros. So, Scott, why don't you take us out?
So, with that, it's time to turn down the volume on Mousterpiece Melodies. What's on the playlist for our next episode? From 1999, Tarzan. And while you wait, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. Monica Castillo, thank you again so much for joining us. I know we mentioned your credits at the top of the show, but can you let listeners know where they can find you out on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky and Instagram under MCasti Movies. That's MCASTI Movies. A lot of my reviews appear at rogerebert.com, so feel free to find me there, or on KCRW. I'm also working at the Jacob Burns Film Center, so if you're in the Westchester County area and you come through Pleasantville, you may see me on stage introducing a film or moderating a Q&A.
All right, and of course, we'd love for all of you out there to listen along. Tell us what you think. Do you love the songs of Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros? You cannot hate the songs of these movies. You cannot possibly. But if you have any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share, you can always reach me at mousterpiececinema@gmail.com. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece. And by the way, I just realized when we talked earlier, I mentioned, all the weird stuff we got into early on in the pandemic. I should have mentioned, the Disney brackets I started doing in the pandemic on Twitter. Back when I was on Twitter. If Blue Sky ever brought polling in, I probably would be insane enough to bring it back, but they haven't done that yet. Probably better for my mental health that they haven't. Anyway, the one thing I'll call out in terms of writing that I'm doing, as I mentioned in our last episode, I am weekly at Episodic Medium covering the mostly very funny and enjoyable Peacock show Poker Face in its second season. I have, thankfully, unlike with Andor, I have screeners, so I've been staying current with it, and there have been many interesting episodes this season. Keep an eye out for more weekly coverage there. Scott, where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw, as well as on Letterboxd at Scott Renshaw, on cityweekly.net, where the week that this goes up, I will be covering the local release of the new Wes Anderson film, The Phoenician Scheme, in addition to other new releases of the week of June 6th. That's at cityweekly.net, and I'm Scott Renshaw.
And I'm Josh Spiegel, and we'll see you all next time on Mousterpiece Melodies.